America has a spending problem, and it's not just our government. In fact, Americans have a spending addiction that's entirely fueled by shoddy consumer debt. While the American dream of the past was built on hard work and slow and steady growth, today's American dream is all about the appearance of wealth while you max out credit cards and rack up loans. So let's uncover the truth about American consumer finance to see just how bad things have really become in this week's Modern Problems YouTube channel video. The key issue in today's video really revolves around the mismatch of how consumers feel that they're doing financially versus what their spending actually looks like. It's no secret right now that there are concerns about the economy. Stubborn inflation, slow wage growth, and now tariffs are looking likely, although who really knows, to make things from overseas, which is most manufactured goods in the US, more expensive. So we'll take a two-pronged approach to understand both the underlying economic issues as well as the psychosocial problems that are driving insane levels of spending using consumer debt. We'll start with the easy one, the overall economy. So going back to 2008 and 2009, when we emerged from the latest financial crisis, financial services were crushed, the real estate markets had collapsed, and many people had to give up home ownership. Well, this was a period of doom and gloom. It was really a reset point for the economy. The widespread catastrophe had burst the bubble, and so American consumers were forced to start from a low point. However, as the years went on, a newfound addiction to government stimulus, low interest rates, which make it cheaper to borrow, and the explosion of internet businesses like e-commerce were all generally pretty good to the consumer. While the recovery started off sluggish, by the time of Trump's first election, it was in essence complete, and the consumer was back to seeing improvements. Employment was good, the stock market was booming due to tech company growth, and people were feeling pretty alright financially. Now, going over to the spending side, when people feel good financially, they take on a little more risk to live a little better. Buying houses, taking out loans for cars, splurging on the latest iPhone and MacBook. As you can see in the graph, consumer spending was up, but it wasn't quite problematic yet. Even if you were buying things with debt, as mentioned before, rates were low enough to the point where it didn't really burn. And psychologically, the Great Recession was still in people's minds, so they weren't ready to take on a whole lot of risk again. So up until 2020 about, the health of the American consumer was generally all right. Of course you had the outliers, but things were okay overall. Now, was there anything in 2020 that could affect the economy and consumer spending? Oh yes, COVID-19, of course. You may be thinking, staying at home? That was probably great for the consumers, right? Less opportunities to spend money. And the stock market was still booming, led by the tech giants, so the economy must have been okay, right? Well, maybe for a little bit, but the underlying trends of consumer spending definitely changed. So, starting with the economy, it's probably obvious what was happening. At first, people were fearful, closing their pocketbooks amid layoffs and general uncertainty. People were staying in and therefore not spending on things like experiences, travel, dining out. However, as things calmed down, people took up to buying things like home office setups, home improvement projects, new tech, toys, games, you name it. And of course, all of this spending was propped up by not debt, well, for the consumer at least, actually was stimulus spending for the first go around. The government wants people to spend because that makes companies happy. Therefore, the government has paid its taxes and not attacked, etc., etc. However, while this stimulus was happening, the underlying strength of the economy was fading. One thing about stimulus, it creates inflation. All those $1,400 checks had to come from somewhere, thin air, of course, which launched a massive spike in inflation, hurting nearly every person and company in the US. And this is really the key of the macroeconomic background, inflation. In small doses, it can actually be a good thing, but inflation in one massive hard to swallow pill is choking. And thus, to slow it down, Jerome, inflation is transitory Powell, turned off his money printer and started cranking on his rates machine, bringing interest rates up slowly at first, then jacking them up when his original hypothesis was wrong. And while this was happening, things were opening up, and people felt the urge to get out and spend. So while things looked okay on paper, and in the stock market, there was a little too much momentum than what the economic fundamentals could keep up with. And that takes us to the consumer. The overheating machine had to get its fuel from somewhere, and that's where we were, as Americans, playing our dutiful role by swiping our plastic cards. We spent the whole pandemic pimping out our cribs with new TVs, furniture, cookware. You can buy it on Amazon. We probably did during this time. And then we were given immense freedom after being locked up for a year, and you know what that means: vacation. And of course, it was probably a good time to get that vacation home, upgrade to a bigger property, get some more space. So let's get a mortgage, even though rates are starting to look a little high. And you can't move into the nice neighborhood without driving a fancy new BMW, so sign me up for a 10% auto loan. And then the story goes on and on. And this is where the psychology comes into play. In my mind, I see three major forces at work: the keeping up with the Jones effect, the TikTok shop effect, and some generational shifts. So first, it's keeping up with the Joneses. What does this mean? It simply means trying to spend to make sure everyone knows you look rich while you're barely able to make your credit card payments and you're living paycheck to paycheck. You see every influencer online with the Louis bag, a nice car, a new house. What you don't see is them struggling to make ends meet, maxed out credit cards, and a lack of savings. When I look around my city and see the number of designer bags, luxury cars, new MacBooks, and just how crowded some of these stores are, and I then compare that to the statistics about consumer spending, I'm absolutely perplexed and appalled. If you look around, you'd think everything is okay. But when you really dig in to find out 50% of Americans have less than $5,000 in savings, it's just absolutely absurd. So then you're influenced by what you see and not the logical background information, thus feeling pressured to spend money on stupid things because everyone else does. While always a force, this was made so much worse by the explosion of social media during the pandemic, as all you saw was unrealistic collections and day in the life videos and whatnot. Speaking of social media, there's the TikTok shop effect, aka the worst trend in consumerism ever. This isn't about the actual TikTok shop. It's really about the fact that everything you see is an ad for some dumb crap you don't need. Aesthetic fridge refilling, Erewhon smoothies, and clothes galore. This stuff is peddled to you by creators who are paid to have these items by malicious dropshippers who don't care about you or even the product at all. With people stuck at home, this trend really took off as people vented their frustrations by swiping their cards for whatever aesthetic storage container for cereal they don't even eat because they saw some TikTok mom do it. Absolutely insane and really taking advantage of people's inability to recognize the mass marketing that is targeted at them and their place of daily escape. And then finally, there are some generational shifts. Millennials and Gen Z get a lot of crap for not being disciplined, and it's totally true. But I really think it's about young people in general. When boomers were young, they were young, wild, and free, which means they weren't always in the best financial position. However, what's changed is that they weren't being taken advantage of by an elusive and complex industry of financial firms and tech firms and consumer firms that know how young people think. There was never an option for a boomer to use buy now, pay later to DoorDash Taco Bell that never even gets eaten. However, this stuff exists today and it's designed to crush young people and keep them in debt and paying interest forever. And don't get me started on student loans. These actually used to be helpful for social mobility. Now they suffocate ill-informed 18-year-olds for the next 10, 20, 30 years of their life. I can't believe no one talks about how devastating these can be to high schoolers. No school is worth $300,000 in debt, especially if you're just going to party and smoke weed the whole time. So, this is where the younger generations are really getting targeted. And so that's how we got to where we are today. Let's take a peek at the numbers just to see how bad this has all gotten. So for car loans, in 2024, 1.73 million cars were repossessed, the most since 2009, the last financial crisis, up 43% from just 2 years before. With the average payment of $748 a month on a car loan, it's no shocker that people can't keep up And the repo man TikToks have become so widespread. Next, mortgage rates have doubled since 2021's lows, hovering around 7% and looking to stay there for a while. I looked it up, and the difference between about 7% rates and 5% rates for a median price home is about $400 a month for your monthly payment. This has actually discouraged a lot of people from buying a home, so good on them for being responsible because 7% is crazy high. While some people are gambling on adjustable rates to save them, I wouldn't be so certain as these mechanisms are partially responsible for the '09 crisis, as they can quickly flip things upside down during uncertain times, and oh boy, we're in some uncertain times right now. And next, student loans. So Americans owe a whopping $1.75 trillion in student loans, both federal and private. Ouch. Even worse, this is concentrated within just 16.6% of the population. So who's going to want to bail them out? Certainly not the blue collar workers that are going to be leading our manufacturing economy. This statistic really hurts because the benefits of a college degree continue to diminish. So I just suggest you really know what you want to do with your life before signing it away to some predatory agency as an 18-year-old. And then finally, credit cards, the holy grail of consumer debt. Total credit card debt in America is $1.21 trillion according to the Fed, up $284 billion from before the pandemic. So if you thought I was exaggerating about bad spending habits from before the pandemic till now, I wasn't. People are really screwing themselves over with high interest credit cards because it's easy. There's no mental barrier. And people will seek pleasure now over mature decision making. This breaks down to about $9,000 per household with 20% rates on average. That really hurts. If you can't not spend on a piece of plastic, get rid of it ASAP. These companies do well when Americans are hurting, and guess what? The companies are doing A-okay right now at your expense. So, as you can see, consumers are hurting right now. We need to get wise to what's being done to us. There are whole industries built on people's poor, misinformed financial choices. That's not okay. Education is the number one way to get rid of this, and so it's important to think about why we're buying something, who benefits from it, and ultimately, do we really need it? Especially given the additional costs if it's going to involve debt to get it. Before we wrap up, I just want to look at a couple interesting trends or things to look out for, and really just warnings of how bad things can get. So first, buy now, pay later, BNPL services are where you essentially take on debt to make little purchases, like DoorDash for God's sake, which have seen significant growth in recent years, driven by players like Klarna and Afterpay, who promise lower rates than credit cards, as well as have made the whole process easy and almost gamified. These services are especially popular among young consumers who don't grasp the seriousness of the financial burden they're placing themselves under. In 2025, 47.4% of Buy Now Pay Later users were Gen Z, while 40.6% were millennials. However, the convenience comes with risks. Over 60% of Buy Now Pay Laters have simultaneous consumer loans, potentially leading to debt accumulation and overextension. So whatever you do, don't finance a pizza because it's only going to come back to bite you. And then the other trend is negative equity in car loans, which have reached alarming levels. In Q4 2024, 24.9% of trade-ins towards new car purchases had negative equity, meaning the borrower owed more money to the lender than the car was actually worth. And that's due to rapid depreciation of cars combined with the very large loans that people are taking out to buy them in the first place. The average amount owed on these upside down loans hit an all-time high of $6,800 plus in Q4 2024. Even more concerning, about 25% of vehicle owners with negative equity owed more than $10,000 on their car loans, greater than what the car was worth. This trend is partly due to the pandemic-induced inventory shortage, which drove up car prices in 2021, 2022. No matter the cause, though, consumers are being affected by negative equity at alarming rates, with those that are rolling over negative equity taking on an additional $159 in monthly payments, as well as over $12,000 more in total financing cost compared to the industry averages. So please, please consider that beat up Toyota and not that brand new Mercedes-Benz that will take up half your pay and depreciate 30% the second you step into it. So, another week, another problem. Credit cards, BNPL, auto loans, student debt. Yeah, it's really bad, and I don't know what's going to slow it down. As things get more expensive, people don't stop buying, they only start borrowing. And that's why America's spending problem is a definitive modern problem. So thank you for watching this week's Modern Problems YouTube channel video. If you have any thoughts or personal anecdotes, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I hope all of you understand the challenges of consumer debt and are making strides to be financially free. And if you have any other thoughts or topic suggestions, again, drop them below to be considered for future videos. Thank you and have a great day.